Good morning, it's the Bartels here at Suzanne's, and this is episode 4 of Family Jewels. Today we're going to be talking about a very phenomenal stone. What's a phenomenal stone? No, it's not something that's just really, really cool, though it is, but a phenomenal stone is something that does anything other than display one color. So we've got a lot of stones that do this, or are phenomenal, I guess you could say. But this one in particular is one of my favorites. It's also my birthstone, so I'm a little partial to it. But we've got a lot of examples here of this stone, and so this is going to be really cool because we're going to get to show you guys a lot of pieces and show you the different ones. And so what is our mystery stone? What's our phenomenal stone we're going to be talking about today?
It's opal.
Woo.
And like Colton brought up, it's one of the birthstones for October. And maybe the most colorful, or maybe one of the prettiest gemstones in the world.
Well, as long as you get a good one. There's some ugly ones.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But I mean,
We
the
stay away from those.
possibilities.
Yes.
Because you can have multiple colors in the stone. There's a whole bunch of different varieties, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So, first thing we're going to talk about here is what makes opals display their color. What is it about the opals that causes what we call the play of color, or showing all the spectral colors of the rainbow? There is one big major factor in that, and that's something that has to do with its formation. So that's what we're going to talk about right now, is how these opals are formed and what that says for how it's going to display color.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. We're gonna change it up a little bit here. So with opals, they are a little bit more unusual because of the way they form, and a lot of stones out there are formed under heat and pressure and a bunch of other different circumstances that causes those stones to form. Opal is very unusual in that it is primarily a sedimentary type stone. So basically where these stones form is going to be real desert areas that receive a lot of rain in the winter, and this is maybe not the climate now, but what it was way back when. So what happens is there are host rocks that are basically filled with silica, and silica is a really fine material that basically can form in almost perfect spheres. And so what happens is, as that rain falls, it's taking all of that silica and creating a solution, and then it kind of goes through all the layers of rock and ends up in these little pockets and cracks in basically the Earth's crust. And as that kind of falls in there and it kind of pools in those little cracks and everything, then when the desert sun comes out and starts drying everything up, it dries that water out and leaves behind the silica. And what happens is the silica in the precious opal anyway, it has those little spheres, and they all stack up on top of each other like they're in a Pringles can, and they create basically a large set of prisms, and they're all little bitty prisms. It's like taking a magnifying glass, and on the edges of it you can see all the different colors and things like that. It's basically doing the same thing, just on a small scale, and millions of these little bitty silica balls basically. And so when they stack on top of each other like that, when the light comes in, it breaks up the light into spectral colors, and it's doing this millions of times within the stone. That's where there's maybe some differences in how they stack. Maybe one goes this way a little bit and another one kind of comes into the side. And as it does that, that's where you're starting to get the different colors as you move the stone. So as you move it, it will look like it changes colors. And what it's doing is it's basically just changing the direction in which the light's coming in, so you're seeing a different color. But what's really cool about this is not only does opal form in those little small pockets and cracks and stuff in the Earth's crust, but also where there was maybe dead trees, prehistoric trees, plant life, some small animals, stuff like that. Sometimes those will leave voids where they've decayed, and in its place, opal will form. So you can have opalized fossils and opalized trees and things like that that are really cool. They don't get used in jewelry very often, but every once in a while you might see one, which is pretty cool. But what the phenomenal thing is with opals is its play of color. And so like we just talked about, you know, that play of color is done by the little silica spheres that are stacked on top of each other. Now this doesn't happen in all opal, this happens just in precious opal. And so common opal and stuff like that, it doesn't get that play of color, but it has the same basic makeup and everything, but it looks kind of muddy. So because these form a little bit differently and in different areas and things like that, it does create different types of opal. So whenever we're talking about different types of opal, it's relation to how it reflects the light, how it has that play of color, and also what its body color is and things like that. So there are several different kinds, and the main ones that you're going to see out there is white opal. White opal is in the gem world going to be pretty common. You get a lot of calibrated sizes, or sizes that they cut to the exact same size and dimensions every time, and it's used a lot in commercial jewelry. So a lot of that stuff that you're going to see being sold online and box stores, stuff like that, a lot of that is going to be white opal. And so it's going to have a white body color, obviously, and it's going to have just little bitty flashes of color called pinfire, and it's just like little specks. You don't get those big broad flashes that look like paint strokes across it. You won't get that in white opal. It's just real small flecks of color, almost like somebody just sprinkled glitter on it. So that's probably the most common one. Then we get into crystal opals. Crystal opals are going to be much higher quality. They're going to have big flashes of color. They're going to be bright. They're going to show you a bunch of different colors. And with crystal opals, they're going to be semi-transparent to transparent. So they'll allow a little bit of light to go through them. You can kind of see through them, but you also see that play of color whenever the light's reflected. And those can get really expensive. Usually those are just a one-piece deal, and we'll talk about the multi-piece deals or the assembled stones here in a little bit. But then we move on to fire opal and jelly opals. Fire opals are going to be usually kind of an orange to yellow-orange body color. A lot of times you don't see any play of color in it, and it looks just like kind of a milky, little bit of a milky stone. But they do have a little bit of a different look to them, so they don't kind of stand out like a garnet or a citrine or something like that. They aren't as crisp of reflections, and so they do look a little bit different. With the jelly opals and some of the fire opal, you do get that play of color, but it's really weird. It's almost like you have that play of color, or those little flashes of color floating in water almost. It's kind of unusual, and water opals are that way too. Or water opals, jelly opals, pretty much kind of the same thing here. And so they still have some play of color, but it's really faint for the most part, and they do look like you could just squish them. I mean, they look like candy almost. And so they're not overly common, and they're not used in jewelry a lot. Especially high-end jewelry, they're not used in there a lot just because they don't have that real exceptional play of color. Now, once we get into like the boulder opals, they're a little bit different. That's some of that stuff that you can find that's maybe petrified wood that has been replaced with opal, things like that. And so you actually get like some common opal or that brown stuff, and then you have like little streams or seams and stuff of precious opal intertwined or interlaced in that, and so you get like these little nice flashes of bright color, and then the rest of the stone is just kind of dull, but it's really cool stuff, and we'll show you some examples of that here in just a little bit. Then what we get into is the really, 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 really nice stuff, which is black opal. Black opal is probably the most prized type of opal in the entire world. Well, it is. This stuff is just incredible. You're going to have tremendous color. They're going to be extremely nice, big, broad flashes of bright, vibrant colors, and they're going to show you pretty much every color you can imagine. And the main thing with black opals is they are a very dark, almost opaque, sometimes they are opaque, backgrounds to them. So they have like a great contrast in the colors. We've got the really nice dark background, and then we've got those big bright flashes of color. So that's what makes them very sought after. And we'll show you some examples that are getting really close into that black opal range. And kind of what makes those valuable is definitely their color. They're also very, very rare. The best stuff, we're going to talk about where all that comes from, but most of the time you're going to hear it coming from Australia. So the only other ones that we haven't really covered are doublets and triplets, which are actually assembled stones. So these are going to be stones that we're using a thin slice of precious opal, and then we're putting something on the back to make it stronger, and then we're putting something on the top to make it stronger, protect it in the case of a triplet. And so that's something that we can talk a little bit more about too, and whenever we get ready to show you the examples. But now we kind of covered the different types of opal. We're going to talk about maybe a little bit more about what makes them valuable at each level and kind of what to expect in comparison on each one of those levels. So we've kind of
talked about everything.
We talked about we kind of ran on without you, and so basically we covered all the different types of opals, and we've gotten to the point now we want to kind of talk about what makes them valuable. I mentioned that the crystal opals and the black opals have a little bit more obvious play of color. Some of them are really bright and stuff like that, but what is it that makes those stones in each kind of level, what makes those stones so valuable?
Well, to start off with, probably, I guess, and I know that you've already talked about the different opals, but black opal is the rarest of the opals.
Yep.
And so what Colton is kind of getting at is each one of these different types of opal, there are factors kind of like in diamonds that control or are going to maybe make one opal more valuable than the other. First thing maybe is we'll kind of talk about is opal, because a play of color can have a variety of colors in the stone.
Yep.
And that's one thing that's good, is that you have more than one play of color in the stone. You get to like 5 or 6 different colors in a stone. That's good. The other thing is the most valuable color, maybe not the most popular in the United States, but the most valuable color in an opal is red. And one reason is it seems to be one of the rarer colors to be found in opal is red.
Yeah.
United States, I think, probably predominantly like more blues and greens rather than the reds and oranges. But in all opals, a lot of that value, depending, if everything else is equal, the more red that's in that opal, the more expensive it's going to be. Maybe not necessarily more valuable, more expensive it's going to be. So then you've got how much of that stone has play of color, and you kind of look at it percentage-wise. There are going to be areas in that stone, whenever you're looking at it face up or whatever, and you're not moving it, what you do is you try to see how much of that stone is totally covered with play of color. The more that gets to 100%, the more valuable that stone is. The other thing gets to be is almost like a Christmas. Is that right? It sounds like Christmas. A Christmas. How crisp that light is, or how crisp that color is.
We're not English teachers.
Yeah, right.
Be glad about that.
I'm gonna be tongue-tied here pretty soon anyway. So some of that, sometimes when you look at an opal, it's almost like the light looks like it needs to be focused. It's kind of fuzzy, or
It doesn't have that crispness.
yeah, or yeah, that's it.
Not Christmas.
Yeah. So, and we probably have some examples. You know, I don't know if Colton has showed you some of
No,
them
not
or
yet.
not.
We're holding them in suspense.
So we've got some, like there's a solid or solid opal. We have some doublets.
Not that we have hollow opals.
Yeah, but you'll kind of understand. I think he's kind of told you a little bit about
The assembled
opal and
stones and stuff like that.
And we have some boulder opal and things like that. But all of these opals, they're based on that, how bright that light is or play of color is, the colors in there, and how much color is in the stone. A lot of customers will even, if it's a loose opal, they'll grab that stone and they'll turn it around and say, oh, look, it's got color all the way through it. But a lot of times how that opal's actually judged is it's in one position and you're looking at it there.
Yeah.
Any opal, if you move the light source or you move yourself, the way you're looking at it, those colors will move across the stone.
Yeah, and so you may see better colors from another angle, but where it's going to be judged is like directly face up, looking right at you, because that's the most common viewpoint. So, you know, we're not going to look at it from the side and go, ooh, well, there's some really nice color over here. Oh, that's great. Well, you never see it.
Yeah, you go around like this, you know, looking at that.
Yeah, because then if you do that and you got that, you know, that's in a pendant and some lady's wearing it, there's probably going to be a lot of people getting slapped because they're just trying to see nice color when she thinks they're looking somewhere else. Yeah, we don't like that. So, okay, so now that we've been talking about this and we haven't shown you anything, but we've been telling you, hey, we've got all this stuff, and we keep looking down at the ones we've got in front of us because they're really cool. Even though we see them every day, they're still fun to look at. So the first one that we talked about was the white opal. We've got somewhat of an example of that. It's not maybe the best example. This is maybe kind of almost getting into that crystal opal, but it's not great stuff. It's a cool shape, but this is going to be really hard to see on here. And you can see when I move this, it's got just a tiny bit of play of color. I feel like I'm on like jewelry TV or something right now. We've got 4 left. No, it's not like that. And you know, if my brother was over here, he'd probably be trying to sell you some Panzo Topanzanite, but that doesn't exist either. So, but whenever you look at this, and I'm going to try and shade this a little bit here so you can kind of see, it's got some play of color here, not a lot. And this is going to be kind of that little bit of pin fire and everything that we were talking about earlier. It's not real great stuff. It's pretty common. And so you might start seeing some really odd shapes, kind of this boomerang shape, what I've got here, which they're just kind of cool and fun to play with. But as far as price goes, they're not real expensive. You can get some larger stones. So if you're just wanting opal and basically just say you've got it, but you don't want to spend a lot of money, white opal's the way to go. There's a lot of it, and it's very common in the jewelry industry. You can find it pretty much anywhere. If you need a certain size, you can get it. If you need it cut a certain way, you can pretty much get it. There's some people that even carve the stuff. So while he's getting that, he's going to get a better example of that white opal. Why don't we look at, let's see, what do we want to look at next? Why don't we look at the boulder opal next? I've got a couple examples here. One's maybe going to be a little easier to see than the other, so that's why I grabbed a couple of them. And I know we're not going in the same order that we talked about them, but we're still going to look at them this way. So, but this one, I'm going to kind of shade this a little bit and see if I can get this to focus on it a little bit here. But with the boulder opal, you can see this has got the common opal or potch, and that's what this brown yucky stuff is. But where those crystals all lined up and stacked up, that's where you get that play of color. So you can see that green and stuff in there. It's really tough to see on here, but you get the little play of color in here. So we've got some greens and blues and yellows in there, and maybe just a touch of orange. We've got maybe a little bit better example of this, where the whole stone is polished, is this little boulder opal right here. It looks like an M&M. But whenever you look at this, again, I'm trying to get this to focus on here, but you know, we got our lights in a really bad spot. So if you look at this, we've got some blues and greens and yellows and purples in there, and it kind of goes all over the stone. And this is one of those that's probably, you know, something that was petrified, that, you know, the little voids and stuff got filled in with the precious opal. But that's something, you know, with opals, it's really tough to see them on camera. So if you want to really get a good look at these, come on by our store and check them out. Let's see, the next one we're going to look at is the jelly opals, and we've just got one little example here. It's got some good color in here, and again, it's probably going to be tough to see. Let's see here. You can kind of see some of those colors come out in there, especially if I turn it at the right angle. You get some reds right in there. But you see it's kind of interlaced with some of that common opal, but where it's the precious opal, you can see through it. Like right here in this top part, you can actually see light coming all the way through it because it's transparent, which is kind of cool because you can actually see all the way into the middle of the stone. Probably can't on there, but, well, I can. And so with those, you know, most of the time with the jelly opals, kind of like that, you know, you can see some play of color, but it's pretty faint for the most part. And with like the fire opals and stuff like that, a lot of times they're just kind of an orange body color, and you really don't see any play of color in it at all. Let's see, why don't we go to the crystal opal next. Now this one we've got a good example of. Again, probably going to be a little bit more difficult to see on the camera, but
Oh, wow.
woo, that's bright. There we go. And it's probably not real focused, but you can see we've got a lot more obvious color here. And yeah, here we've got some more examples coming in here. But yeah, really pretty stone. This one's got oranges and some reds and greens and blues and yellows. It's kind of got a little bit of everything in it. And you know, the other thing is too is on these crystal opals you can see through them, so you can see the light coming through the stone. And so with that kind of maybe causes it to lose a little bit of its obvious color because you're not getting that contrast there, but they're still really pretty stones.
I don't know if we can even get...
Why don't we do this? We're going to move our camera just a little bit here so we can maybe get some better views here. Turn us around.
Still too much light.
Well, we can still see some there. But on this one, on this little crystal opal, you can kind of see the different colors coming out in there a little bit better. And kind of, there we go. This might help. We'll get this on a dark background. And we'll maybe shade it a little bit. There we go. Now we can start to see some more colors. And see that these are showing a lot more vibrant colors in here than what the white opals did. But we've got some examples here. That one, you can see really good color in that one, at least on camera. This other stone is maybe actually a little bit better, having more reds and stuff in it. But this one, you can see those obvious greens and everything in there. Then we'll go to like the more towards the black opal. These aren't exactly black opals, but they're really, really close. These are maybe going to be more towards like, they're not quite black opal, but they're more the gray base, but they've got a lot of blues and greens. This one's got that red seam that flows through there. This actually looks really good on camera.
But this
here.
is a doublet.
Yeah, this is a doublet. So, you know, we were talking about the assembled stones, and to kind of give you an example of that, we'll show you, you can see that brown that's on the back of that. This is potch or common opal, and if you can look really close, there's a black seam there. That's actually the cement that's holding that precious opal to the back of it. The reason for this is a lot of times this nice precious opal occurs in really thin seams, and the only way to stabilize it so that it can be used is it has to have something on the back of it to strengthen that opal. This is another example of that. And this one's got really, really good play of color, especially in the top portion there. You can see those oranges and reds and yellows in there.
And the light is crisp.
Yeah, it's that crispness. So we're gonna take some enunciation classes in between this episode and the next, because it's been kind of bad. So this is going to show you a little bit more of the assembled pieces here. You can see we've got the back on here, and then you can kind of see the seam of where those two pieces are glued together. So this is an opal doublet. A triplet will actually have a clear dome on the top of it to give it even more protection. We got another example here. This one looks awesome on here. We got those nice little reds and oranges right in the middle. But some of the prettier ones I think that we've got is actually this match pair. These are loose. And let's open that up real quick. There we go.
We need to cover it again.
There we go.
It's almost like they got a light on them.
Yeah. Even in the shade, these things have some awesome, awesome play of color. You can see as we move it, those colors, some of them tend to change colors, change location, but you still have that play of color all over. These are also doublets, but I mean, they are just gorgeous stones. These are matched for earrings, so that's what's kind of cool with these. So the one thing that we haven't shown you is the synthetics. So and that's the one thing we haven't talked about either. With the synthetic stones, we're gonna freehand this here. With the synthetic stones, they are actually opals, just like everything else that we've talked about that's synthetic, but they're being done in a lab. So the thing with synthetic opals, and what I loved in class, was they are really, really easy to spot when you know what you're looking for. With natural opals, the colors are pretty random, and the patterns are really random. Sometimes it almost looks like a brush stroke, but on synthetic stuff, it looks like honeycomb or columns or almost like a lizard skin in some cases. It depends on how it's cut. And so basically the crystals formed so perfectly in this synthetic stuff that it just doesn't look real. It looks too good to be true, and that's usually the case. And so with this synthetic stuff, what we look for is we look for that columnar structure that's not in natural opal, at least not as perfect as what it is in the synthetic stuff. Or we look for that kind of honeycomb lizard skin look, where it's almost got like little hexagonal areas of color, almost looks like pixels of color on the surface of the stone. It doesn't do that in the natural stuff, at least not consistent over the entire stone, whereas in synthetic it does it over the entirety of the stone. And if you look at those from the side, you see the columnar structure. So it looks like tall pillars of color, and they're all real consistent. That doesn't happen in the natural world, so it only happens in a lab. And what we're going to show you is, this is actually a synthetic opal triplet. So this one has actually black onyx on the back of it to give it the dark background, and then it's got a black glue that's holding that synthetic piece of opal on it, and then on the top it's got a piece of colorless quartz that's capped so that it makes it a little bit stronger. But this stuff's really inexpensive. You can get it a lot of places, but if you're wanting opal, this really isn't what you want to go for. It's almost better if you just get a white opal natural than get the synthetic stuff. So we're going to show you this real quick. This is the synthetic opal. Looks incredible. Too good to be true, because, well, it is. And so we're going to get a little bit closer here, maybe a little more light. There we go. This looks like just a crazy good black opal, but it's not. It's synthetic. This stuff's really, really inexpensive. Again, it's being a synthetic. If you're gonna spend money on an opal, if you want the look of black opal and can't afford it, I guess this is a good way to go. But for anybody that's had any knowledge of synthetic opals and what to look for, they're really, really easy to spot. So they're not going to hold value very well, if at all. Nobody's going to want to buy these back or anything like that. That's going to be found in a lot of commercial, low-end jewelry, stuff like that, where they're wanting a big look. But this has got actually two smaller ones. You can see the back of it. It's got that black on it to give it that dark body color, and then the one above it, this is the top view. So again, there's a lot of that stuff out there, but I guess the only other we wanted to talk about real fast was where these are found. Oh, that's a good shot. Quick flex.
That's one of our better views. That's our best side.
Yeah, that's our best side right here. So, okay. So, real quick, we're going to go over locations real fast. Main place that almost everybody that's ever heard of opals, they all hear Australia. There's a bunch of different places in Australia that actually lend themselves to different types of opal. Some places are more famous than others for their opals. And so let's real quick talk about that, and then we'll let them get back to their day here.
Okay. In Australia, at one time, and I don't know if this is Australia or somebody that actually knew, but they said that like maybe 90 to 95% of the world's opal came from Australia.
Down under.
Yeah. And probably some of the more famous ones would be Lightning Ridge or Coober Pedy or...
Those are the mining areas, not individual opals.
But Lightning Ridge is really famous because it produced some of the finest black opal in the world.
Yay!
So,
and then Coober Pedy and Andamooka are just fun words to say.
Then another country that's kind of come on here recently that's has a lot of opal or has produced opal in significant quantities would be Ethiopia. And it's actually a whole different type of opal as far as the way it's formed. It's a volcanic, from a volcanic heated water stuff that replaces in cracks and crevices versus the sedimentary that the Australian has.
Yep.
And then Brazil at times has produced quite a bit of opal, but still the biggest country is Australia. And then in the United States, we have a place called Virgin Valley that's in Nevada, and that produces what we call black opal. The Australians still have a little bit of a problem. They think the only place that produces black opal is Australia, but Virgin Valley has some really pretty opals. And actually, I think the largest black opal in the Smithsonian is from the Virgin Valley. So
This just kind of show you guys real quick, kind of what the Ethiopian stuff's going to look like. It's kind of that crystal opal, but it doesn't have a ton of play of color in most cases, and it usually has a little bit of a yellow body color to it.
It's actually better looking than what it looks like on that camera. But
yeah. But so are we.
That's not the good looking. So to kind of wrap things up a little bit, opal is a fairly old stone. I mean, it goes back to, what was it, Pliny, I think
Greeks. He had a lot to say about that. He was kind of inspired by all the different colors and stuff. And, it was long believed that opals held the powers of every stone imaginable because it had all the colors. But it has been around a long time. The Romans loved the stone. I mean, they basically treated it as the ultimate.
Yeah, it's the most precious.
Yeah,
stone.
the most precious stone. So, you know, they've been around and known about for a very, very long time. They've been used in jewelry for emperors and kings and royalty all over the world throughout the centuries. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that's it really grabs and holds your attention when you see them. And so I guess that's another thing that just makes the opals so phenomenal. You know, outside the definition, they are a phenomenal stone because they are just something that they've held their value through the years, and they still continue to surprise people whenever they see them for the first time. So, you know, diamonds are always, everybody sees diamonds, but whenever somebody sees an opal for the first time, especially a nice opal, there's always that kind of sense of awe and wonder that you don't get with many other stones. And so that's kind of cool.
So it's phenomenal in a couple ways.
Yes, by gemological definition and by, well,
the reaction we get from people.
Yeah, it's phenomenal all around. So stop by Suzanne's and check them out. We've got a lot of opals for you to look at, and we can talk a little bit more about them if you have questions and things like that. And we've got a lot that are already set up, so if you need to take them home, they're up for adoption. But we thank you guys for joining us. Tune in next week for episode 5 of Family Jewels every Tuesday at 10:45. Thank you guys. See you later.